where the Commanders are right now, but there are some interesting things that we can kind of kick around. The title of the article is How the Commanders Reached the Crossroads and What Comes Next. And it goes into what really was the kind of the crossroads of the season. They have the what we called a moral victory against the Eagles, and they were under 500, but the trade deadline was right there. And if you look at it, I don't know that it would have made a difference had they not pulled the trigger, but they say via Zoom, they had a meeting with the owner, Josh Harris. Mm-hmm. And it was, hey, all of these offers are coming in. Mm-hmm. All these people want Chase Young. They want Montez Sweat. And Josh Harris obviously said, okay, do what's in the best interest of the team. Let's trade these guys for draft picks. Since then, they haven't won a game, right? Or no, they won one game against the Patriots. But the defense has been even worse than it was, and the season is completely unraveled. And we know where it's headed. Cakes, can you get your Ron Rivera?
His tee time tracker?
Oh, that's the easiest tee time tracker ever.
Yeah, I've got it right here. I mean, I'm sticking by this date. This is Black Monday, January 8th, 2024.
Month and 2 days.
This is when Ron will be officially let go as the head coach of the Commanders. January 8th, 2024. Mark it on your calendar.
But even if Sweat and Chase are here, they're probably still 4-9.
Probably.
I mean, I can't imagine what game would they have won with those guys.
I mean, you just never know. So they lost the Seahawks in a close game.
Okay, but
so maybe those guys make a play that's different.
Maybe I'll give that to you, but
or maybe Chase Young over pursues, nearly gets a sack, and then falls down flat on his face, and then doesn't get back up to chase Jalen Hurts to the sideline, which is what he did in the Niners.
I mean, how many times did they sack Tommy DeVito?
I think it was
nine times.
Yeah,
they still lost the game.
Right.
So it's not like they would be a better team with those guys.
But look, it kind of was a signal that from Josh Harris, the signal was, I'm more concerned about the future. Go get draft picks. I'm more concerned about rebuilding this roster, and who knows how much it's going to be, if it's going to be an absolute demolishment of this team, or if they're just going to try and, replace certain spots.
Yeah.
But he was indicating, I'm more concerned about next season than this year.
I don't think this is a tweak here and there to the roster. I think when Harris and Eugene Shen, the analytics nerd that they hired, when they start looking at some of the bloated salaries here and guys that they feel like they can get a good return on if they trade them, I think you're going to see a big-time overhaul of this roster. It's not just going to be like a small piece here, minor move there. I think they're going to look at this as, Ron Rivera was poor at drafting, equally as poor at coaching.
Right.
And the roster's kind of in ruins at this point. But it's a mess.
When you do an autopsy on the season, and we do it after the season, there are going to be a couple of, inflection points, and I think that was one of them, deciding to trade Chase Young and Montez Sweat. Then you have the firing of Jack Del Rio, which maybe had to happen. And I don't know that we talked enough about what Josh Harris said and interpreted. So what he said after, because they put out a statement first, thank you for your service, essentially paraphrasing. But we've decided to move on from you and the DB coach. Harris jumped in a couple hours after and said, I knew our first season of ownership would include challenges along the way, and we will not shy away from hard work, nor will we be deterred by adversity. As Coach Rivera and I discussed, all of our energy for the remainder of the season will be focused on playing better, more consistent football, and developing our players. And I think this is the most important part, while intently evaluating the areas in which we need to improve this offseason. It's all about next season. It's always been about next season for Josh Harris.
Especially now that you're 4-9. Every ounce of energy should be devoted to improving the roster for 2024. Evaluating who's currently on the roster that you plan on keeping, and pieces from outside of the organization, whether they're free agents, potential draft picks that you're about to draft onto your team. You should be looking forward at this point.
I mean, this is a huge decision for Harris because he's putting his stamp on the team.
Mm-hmm.
This is where he's going to hire his guy as a head coach. He's going to hire his GM. He's going to make some moves, obviously, with the personnel on the field. Right? There's going to be roster moves. There might be a complete overhaul. Who knows? But he's putting his stamp on it. This is a huge offseason for Josh Harris because this is like a 5-year stamp, depending on who he brings in.
Yeah,
if this team is 9-4 right now, okay, you're obviously bringing back everybody. But at 4-9 and could be 4-13, you've got to push a lot of buttons. And this is a huge offseason for Josh Harris and the ownership group. 100%.
In the article, it points out a lot of the players who they surveyed, some of them anonymous, say they really like Coach Rivera, right? And he's apparently built a pretty good relationship.
I'm sure he has.
With Harris. But a front office source, unnamed, said for whatever reason, the players just didn't seem to be fired up this year.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can see that, especially in the last 2 weeks, getting outscored 90-25.
Right.
I mean, come on. But and who knows who he's going to hire? But again, we've talked about it the last few days. There's not one player. The coaching staff's going to be gone. There's not one player that you say we gotta keep him.
No,
there's not one. I mean, some people feel that way about Hal. I don't, but some people do. Some people may feel like McLaurin's a guy you need to keep. Okay, you can sell me on that. But everyone else, you can make whatever move you need to do.
I'm listening to offers for every single player on the roster. There is nobody that's exempt on a 4-9 team. I am not going to hold anything back. If you call me with a good deal for Jonathan Allen, I'm going to ship him out. If you want Deron Payne, I'll listen. He may be harder to deal than Allen because Allen has fewer years left on his deal.
Mm-hmm.
I will listen to offers for every single player on the roster.
I love this.
Every single one.
I love this quote in the article from, again, in another anonymous source, but they say it's a front office. Says, do you think Harris paid $6 billion for the former Carolina regime, pointing to Marty Herney and Ron and all these things? No. And apparently he's fired 2 guys this year. So he's fired already Doc Rivers for the Sixers. They have a new coach in Philadelphia. And then the soccer team that he owns.
Crystal Palace. Don't know who their is it called a manager? I don't even know. What's the coach of a soccer team called? I don't want the soccer heads to get mad at me. Soccer Cakes doesn't want.
I call them coaches, but you might be right.
I don't know. Yeah, he's going to fire Ron, and he's going to bring in a GM. Like, I'm sure he has a short list already. Like, can he start interviewing GMs now, or does he have to wait till the season is over?
Don't know.
How does that work? Like, he probably can't. You can't interview a guy who currently has a GM job. That would be tampering, correct?
Yeah, it doesn't sound right.
So I would.
Finley would know, but I would think you have to wait.
Do guys send resumes?
I don't know. I'm not
sure.
sure.
You know what I mean? Like, you're the director of pro personnel for the Miami Dolphins.
Right.
And you know that there's going to be an opening. Are you hitting up Josh Harris? Do you have an agent?
Oh, I'm sure
they got agents.
You probably have an agent. I don't think you're sending a resume that you print it off on your home printer or send as an attachment. But
I bet people have been reaching out to him for a while.
Definitely.
And I think you're right. Probably this guy, Shen, is going to be a major part of the decision-making.
Absolutely. It's going to tell them.
In the article, they say Magic Johnson might. I don't know. And we don't know how the whole ownership. That he might be part of the decision-making with Josh Harris.
I mean, he is part of the ownership group. He should be consulted. But I don't want him being consulted on, like, who the head coach is going to be. That should be the GM's job. Like, Harris has got to pull the trigger on the GM. Then you let the GM go after and find the next head coach.
They point out, if you look at Harris's track record in other spots with the 76ers, he has Daryl Morey, but he also has Elton Brand.
Mm-hmm.
And with the New Jersey Devils, he has this guy, Tom Fitzgerald, who's a former NHL player, but he also has a strong analytics department. That he is big into having both. Analytics meets the on-field experience.
Perfect. I love that.
Remind me who replaced Rivers in Philly. Is it Nurse?
Nick Nurse, yes.
Nick Nurse is that coach.
That's right.
Right. And if you're just looking at the number of draft picks for Washington, now this is just currently. They've got obviously you're going to have a first rounder. That could be in the top 4 or 5. They've got 2 second rounders. They've got 2 third rounders. They've got a 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. So I think they've got 9 picks.
They're rooting hard for the Bears to lose every game for the rest of the season because they hold that pick.
They do. And they could have more than 9.
Right.
Depending on how many, if they acquire more draft picks for the draft next April. So
That's my guess.
that's a lot.
My guess is they're going to try and just acquire picks,
Mm-hmm.
and rebuild the roster that way.
We'll see.
I think, well, depending on where they pick, like if
You
one
also
of the
have to be
quarterbacks they want,
you have to be active in free agency
right,
though, big time.
which they will, and they have money to spend there. But if the quarterback that they love isn't available wherever they pick, I'm all for trading down from, if they're at 5 or 6, trade down to 10 or 11, get more picks, still pick up an offensive lineman to rebuild the offensive line. Again, for Commanders fans that think this is going to be a 1-year offseason rebuild, I don't see that happening. I think
Although it can happen in the NFL.
Well, as bad as this roster is, I think it's a 2 to 3 season type of rebuild.
I mean, right now in the AFC, the Colts would be in the playoffs, and the Texans are just on the outside of being in the playoffs. Now, the Texans had the number 2 pick, drafted a quarterback that's changed that franchise, and they obviously had other top picks, but it doesn't have to take 5 years in the NFL.
No, I'm not saying 5, but like, if you're a Commanders fan, I would be prepared for 2, maybe 3 more years of pain until you get through it, and then hopefully you've got your offensive line set.
That's too
you got
long.
your franchise quarterback.
I think 3 years is too long.
I said 2 to 3.
You need to see drastic improvement in 2 years.
That's hard to do, man.
Just because
I know you're pointing to examples where it's.
I mean, look
it's
what Daboll did last year with the Giants. I know they're terrible this year.
I understand it. I just think it's hard, and great job by Daboll and those guys, but it's hard to have a drastic improvement in 2 years, especially if you go 4 and 13.
That would mean that they hit a home run with the quarterback,
Whoever
whoever they bring in.
I don't believe in waiting 3 years. I like the Bears, for example. They're not going to give Eberflus a 3rd year.
No, and
move on.
It's been a big disappointment.
You got to win some games.
It starts with the quarterback. I think there should be an improvement in 2 years, but drastic. I'm
not saying win a Super Bowl.
I might use a different word.
Just know that you're headed in the right direction. You know when you're headed in the right direction. You generally know if you just looked around the league like, all right, this coach has got it. Like, I mean, it could change. But we knew that. Look, how long did it take for Sirianni to disprove Cakes' theory? Didn't take that long.
Yeah, it did not take long.
Dan Campbell's in year 3.
But
By year two, you knew the Lions were headed in the right direction.
They also went out. Their personnel department added some big pieces.
Yes.
And they hit on Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
You have to hit, like, if the Commanders swing and miss on the quarterback, it's not going to be a 2-year rebuild. They better hit on the quarterback.
Kyle Shanahan went 6-10 and 4-12.
Yep.
And then
it's a tough first 2 years.
And then went to the Super Bowl.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm giving him more. I'm giving whoever comes in more than 2 years. Like, I'm a long-term thinker. I look out into the horizon.
If you're going to hire a guy for 5 years, I'd say, especially if you're going to have a top 5 pick, that 3rd year, I would expect playoffs.
Right.
Not divisions, not Super Bowls, but definitely playoffs. Year 4, you better be in the playoffs.
Right.
Or then you're getting fired.
Mm-hmm. Hence Ron Rivera.
Correct.
That's the situation he's in currently.
Look, there's context in all of these things, and there are outliers. Ron took him to playoffs in year 1.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's one of the biggest
That was a
farces
fluke.
of all time.
Yeah.
Okay?
Had an 8-1 team last year.
Right. Never had a winning record here. That's going to be his legacy. Couldn't find the quarterback. Also his legacy.
We haven't had a winning season since 2016 here,
It's
Cakes.
been quite a while.
Yeah. I mean, we've been covering this team for almost 30 years. How many multiple playoff win seasons have there been? Zippy, right?
Never. They've won. They've won a playoff game.
Yeah, they've never won
during
2
our
playoff
10 years.
games.
Right. Never.
Yeah, think about that.
That's almost
That's hard to do.
almost impossible.
That's hard to do in 30 years.
I know. It's shocking. Actually.
And probably 80% of the years we've done the show, they've just flat out missed the playoffs.
Correct.
Might even be higher than
Might be
that.
like 85%.
Right. Because add another season now.
Yeah, throw this one on the pile.
I think they're like 4 for 27.
Right.
Something like that, making the playoffs.
Don't even know what that percentage is, but it's not good.
It's
I can tell you
not
that.
good.